Raider Nation, what's good? Jesse Merrick here, coming to you from the field here at Allegiant Stadium as we get set to break down the Raiders game against the 49ers here in the preseason, their second one of the year. And man, we got a lot to talk about. We got a lot of looks at the starters, which was great because we didn't get that in the first game of the preseason. We also got to see Ashton Jeanty as well. He put the power on display, and defensively, we got some good and some bad. So with that, let's hit it. All right, guys, now before we get going, as I always do say, please go to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and sign up for our newsletter. Those things drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. You can do it for free, or we do have a paid version for $6, but that is also a great way to support the growth of our channel. So with that, though, let's get into it and start talking about this game. We'll start with the ones on defense early on. Max obviously created a little bit of noise. We saw him in the backfield a lot, and they rotated a lot of bodies along the defensive line as a whole throughout really the first quarter. I thought that was kind of interesting. There are a lot of guys there that are competing for time along that defensive line. I actually asked Coach Pete Carroll about that after the game, and he said you can interpret that a couple different ways. He's like, one, that like they're still sorting things out, and two, that they have a deep group. So take that as you will. I think it's a really deep group, and I think Patrick Graham is going to have a lot of fun rotating so many of those different bodies through the defensive line, honestly, throughout the year, because it's a lot of younger guys. You know, Thomas Booker comes in as one of the elder statesmen of the group there, which is kind of funny, for a guy that's I think in his third year. So, there's a lot of guys that are on the rise there. Jonah Laulu showed really well. Tyree Wilson actually made some noise too. And then Thomas Booker, again, sliding all over the line. At one time, we even saw a look where we saw Adam Butler at edge and Jonah Laulu in there at D-tackle as well. So a lot of bodies that can be moved around. But I thought that was one of the big positives for the defense. They were much better against the run, and we also saw much better performance from the D-line as a whole, I thought, especially in the first half when most of the top, ones and twos were out there. They did a better job of setting the edge. And again, the tackling was not an issue. That was something Max talked about too, that look, it was the first preseason game, first time they're really strapping them on for real, and knowing that the starters were going to play for a couple plays, So it's one of those things where they went back into the lab, corrected things, and Pete Carroll even noted that a lot of their run blitz fits, didn't really quite work out in that game against Seattle. So they went back to the lab, they fixed those things. He was much more pleased with the way they played in that area of the game, and I think it did show, and so that was really good to be able to see that out of the defense. Obviously, some of the bad there, the coverage on the back end didn't look amazing. Brock Purdy, when he had time, which, look, the defensive line was getting to him, so they kind of rushed him off the spot at times. But when he had time, he was able to kind of pick that secondary apart. He threw for 66 yards and marched them right down the field there. But then, again, the defensive line came through. Tyree Wilson just blew up the guard and then goes and forces the field goal. So for a guy that hasn't really shown, a whole lot thus far, you have to enjoy seeing something like that from him. Obviously, the big key now is just doing it consistently, when the regular season rolls around. But I think that was a good sign to be able to see Tyree kind of start to show what he can do as a rotational type player, which again is what I think he's going to be. And I understand a guy that was drafted as high as him, you want him to be the superstar, but that's probably not going to be the case. I think he will be one of those rotational guys that gets to come in. But Thomas Booker has shown that he's probably going to be one of those dudes. I think he's going to end up being a starter for this team. Pete noted he's competing for a lot of playing time. Another thing that was interesting, Thomas Booker was out there with the ones to start the game, and so was Kyu Blue Kelly as well. This is a guy that really has been fighting his way up the depth chart. At one point he was working with the threes and works his way up to the twos, and they start giving him a shot with the ones, and he just keeps making plays. Again, he also, along with Stokes and all them, didn't look amazing in coverage, still giving up, like I said, those 66 yards there on that drive to Purdy, but Kyu was doing pretty solid work out there in terms of tackling. There was at one point, I believe it was like the third drive. It might have been the first. I think it was the third drive. He runs in there, throws his shoulder in there, and kind of sold out. It looked like he even got a bit of a stinger on that tackle, but showed that he's a willing tackler. It's very clear that he is clawing and scratching for every opportunity he can possibly get to, hopefully for him, lock down a starting role. Obviously, Darian Porter is going to have a little something to say about that. We'll talk more about him later on, but he rotated in mostly with the twos in this game. But again, overall, I thought it was some good, some bad from the defense. The biggest thing, though, was we needed to see them be able to stop the run, and we needed to be able to see them tackle, and I thought they did that against a good rushing team, and that was something that Pete even noted after the game as well, that the 49ers are a team that like to run the ball, and they're a physical group. Obviously, they've got some injuries, all these things, and, certain guys not playing. But you have to be pleased with what you saw from this group in that regard of setting the edge, stopping the run, especially after what they put on tape in that first game in Seattle. Let's talk a little bit about the offense now. We got to look at Ashton Jeanty. We've been telling you guys, and we haven't been talking a ton about him in practice just because we're all kind of used to seeing him make some pretty good plays. But today he put the strength, the power, the contact balance on display early and often. I was impressed with what he showed out there. Obviously, he goes and just completely trucks Lenoir in the hole there. So look, that's one of those things that, nationally, everyone's going to be talking about Jeanty going forward, obviously. So he goes out there and shows the world what he can do. And we talk so much about that contact balance. Like, this guy, he has said one of his favorite things in terms of how people describe him is when they talk about him, being a bowling ball with knives coming out of it. That was one way someone went about describing him. And he put that on display because he is so compact, so physical, and runs so hard behind his pads. And we did get a little bit of a taste of that today. Even on that pass that he caught out of the backfield, he absorbed a real big hit, went back to the sideline, got checked out by the trainers. He said he was all good to go, but still absorbed the hit and kept going. That's that contact balance that I and everyone always talks about when they're bringing up Ashton Jeanty. So we got a bit of a taste of what he'll be able to show the world that he can do when he actually has some room to run. And that takes us to the offensive line. Obviously, the offensive line did a much better job. In that first game, he had 3 carries, finished, I think, for -1 yards. Obviously not the case this time around. They opened up some holes for him. He ran behind Jackson on one of those plays as well. I think that might have been the one where he trucked Lenoir. But so the guys up front were just opening up holes. The one with Lenoir actually was up the right side there. I believe he split Jackson and DJ Glaze, and they really kind of parted the Red Sea and gave him some room to run. So that's a promising sign, I think, for the offensive line as they continue to evolve and grow and get used to playing with each other too. And they do also have to develop that chemistry with Jeanty also. Like, they got to get used to the way he runs and the way that he's going to read the blocks that they set up and all those different things. And so, today was a big step forward in that regard. We got to see every part of Jeanty's game. And then again, on his touchdown even, goes and shows that he's not a dude to be played with, throws his body in there behind the pads. He is going to be a load for people to tackle. And again, I think like I just said, a lot of people are going to be talking about him in the coming days and weeks now after, a lot of overreaction in that first game when he posts the stat line of 1 yard or 3 rushes for -1 yards. Obviously not the case today. So impressed with what I saw to him. Again, with the offense now, we see them go down the field, start trying to push the ball down the field early. I thought that was cool to be able to see. Obviously, look, the throw to Brock is just that, hey, my dude is better than yours. And the corner obviously was kind of falling a bit there, but Brock did kind of moss him a bit. And again, we have said it multiple times. We talked about it when they were out there for the joint practices against the 49ers. Brock is ready to roll. Brock is showing everybody that he is that dude once again heading into year 2. He's going to get so many looks, and Gino's going to give him chances any way he possibly can. He's going to be doing a whole lot of that, honestly, throughout the whole year, and that's going to be no surprise to anybody. Now, we did see them try and really get Dante Thornton involved on those fade balls. That's something he's going to be asked to do a lot. Obviously, he has the size and the speed, and they both didn't really go too well. We'll start with the first one. He goes and actually runs a pretty good route, but he's turning and looking too quickly for the ball. Harry Douglas actually tweeted this out, but I was on the same page as him thinking about it. As he said, he's like, look, you beat him. Don't turn and look for the ball at the 30. Dig it out and then go. Like, you're a fast dude. Beat that dude, stack him, and let Gino lead you up over the top, and that's a touchdown. And because he stopped, kind of turned and looked a little too early, that slowed him down, and that's why Gino, overthrew him. And Gino afterwards was like, oh, we were so close to connecting on that one. That's one of those things where they will go back to the tape. They will tell him, hey, look, you beat him there, stack him, so let's put him behind you and just take off. Use that speed. Because we saw the other day at practice, I mentioned it on the podcast, one of the first times where I just look at him and he stuck his foot in the ground and took off. Like, not many dudes are going to be able to catch this guy. And again, he has that height as well to go along with the speed. So a big thing for him is going to be learning how to do those things. Again, that's what they're going to be asking him to do a lot. So you got to be locked down on those fade balls because we're going to have to kind of see how his route tree develops. But then on the second one, I didn't get a really good look at it. I tried to go back and watch, from the broadcast film, but that they didn't show a replay or anything. But it looked like he kind of ran himself out of bounds a little bit. Obviously, the corner had a little something to say about that, but it looked like they kind of walled him off to the sideline and just was nothing going there. So I think do a better job, more like you did on that first one, try and get inside, stack him, or if you're going to get pushed to the outside, like really pressure him so you're not letting him run you off into the sideline, and things would have gone a bit better for him. But overall, I think Raiders fans, you guys got to be fired up about what you saw from the offense in this game, the starting offense in particular. The big complaints, as we noted, were the tackling on defense, and then they go and correct that. And then on offense, the offensive line and the rushing attack as a whole. They went and corrected that in a big way, and Ashton Jeanty goes and leads the team, in rushing as well. So a big step forward for that group here in week 2. Now, let's get to some winners and losers here from this game. Obviously, there's so much to get to throughout the preseason, and we'll dive more into a lot of this stuff after. This is more of like an instant reaction podcast, but I want to start doing winners and losers after the games of guys that impressed me and other guys that kind of left me wanting a little more. I thought one guy in particular that, again, won the day, as we noted, was Ashton in that offensive line. And again, the starting defensive line. Like I said, Patrick Graham is going to have a lot of fun rotating so many of those guys through. That's going to be interesting to watch, kind of how that develops throughout it. And each of those guys were active too. We saw Jonah shooting the gap, getting in there for a tackle for a loss. We also saw Adam Butler, like I said, bursting through as a defensive end and getting a tackle for a loss as well. We noted Max too, and Tyree showing a couple good things too. So maybe this staff can start to get something out of him a little more consistently. That would be huge for them to be able to do that. Another guy that I thought was a winner was Chris Smith II. He's one of those guys that is in a battle, to take on that first role as a first safety off the bench when they do go to that big nickel spot. And he played well. He was tied for the team lead in tackles with 7 on the day. Looked like he was flying around and was around the ball a ton. Again, he's more of a compact guy, doesn't quite fit the ranginess and the size and length and even the weight that this staff wants out of that position. But showed really good today, showed that he can do a lot of things in terms of tackling. He's obviously involved in special teams too. So he's doing a lot of things for this group. And I thought he looked really good and maybe just looked more comfortable. You know what I mean? And so going in there and finishing for the lead I can't talk right now. Finishing tied for the lead with the tackles on the day at 7, like solid for him. Obviously, you don't want to see that during the regular season from a safety because that means that guys are running around all over the place. But a solid game for him to be able to put that on tape, I thought for sure. Again, Jamal Adams looks fast. This guy multiple times, I'm seeing him, chase down run plays from behind and nearly getting home on him. He's going to be a dude that's going to give a lot of people trouble in whatever package he ends up coming in. We talked about it with Cody Alexander the other day on the podcast, which was great, by the way. Cody's awesome. We will have him on again soon in the future. But we talked about the fact of how much he can do so many different things for you. He's more of your like dime type linebacker where you put him in there, you're not going to lose anything in the run game and either in coverage too. And there was at one point, if I remember right, they were in a 4-3 and Jamal's out there kind of working as the nickel, so that's something he can do. He just provides you a lot of versatility in that role. So when they mix him in there along with Jeremy Chin, all those guys, like that's really big. And obviously we do have to talk about Chin and the interception. He was walked up in that big nickel look. He's down there looking up at the line like he's going to blitz, drops back into coverage. And honestly, he just read Mac Jones like a book. I mean, one heck of a play. Again, we talked about the fact that the coverage on the back end for the most part was leaky, but that was a solid play, really dropping back in coverage and just following the quarterback's eyes to be able to come down with that. A lot of the question marks with him are going to be about his coverage. We know he can tackle, but he comes through in coverage here today in this game, and that's a big win for the Raiders. And if he can do that consistently, that's going to be huge. Now, I do think we need to mention one thing about the defense as well. This is a group, it's a whole new group, but this group last year didn't turn the ball over. And already in 2 preseason games, the first team defense has 2 interceptions, and I think that's massive. Obviously, every coaching staff that's come through here has preached, you get the ball, you get the ball, you get the ball, but like they haven't actually done it. This time around already in the preseason, we're seeing them come down with those picks, and that's going to be massive. This team needs to be able to turn the ball over. Afterwards, I think a lot of people leaving this game saying, hey, look, we think this offense could be maybe a top 10, top 12 offense, but the defense maybe isn't going to be so great. Well, if they can turn the ball over, that's going to help in a big way. And they also gave the Raiders a look in like a sudden change situation too. So that's really good work for the ones to be able to get a chance at that. Now, I think the defense will develop a little bit more. Again, the big question mark is just going to be going down long term. How do the corners look? What's the coverage look like back there? Who ends up being the corners? That's going to be a battle that continues, obviously, for the next couple weeks here and maybe develops even longer because they really do like what they see out of Kai. Kai has been killing it so far for him anytime that he's been out there. in terms of taking advantage of those reps. Again, willing tackler. He's made some plays in practice in terms of the interceptions, all that stuff. So really do keep an eye on him. And this next guy that I want to talk about here, I guess he could kind of almost be like a winner and a loser. I had him wrote down as one of the guys that kind of lost in the game, but that was a Tommy Eichenberg. He played a ton of football for this team. In the first half of things, didn't look too great. Was biting on run fakes, was getting lost, in the wash a couple times, and then gets trucked on one of the touchdown runs for the 49ers as well. So I was sitting there thinking, like, man, this guy's really not going to like going back and watching the tape of this game. But then he comes back, and he also is tied for the team lead in tackles as well. Now, look, not everybody's playing every single snap. In the preseason, he played a ton of snaps in this game today. But you got to like the fact that he kind of corrected those things. Obviously, he's a bit undersized. You don't really want to see him get, lost in the wash or biting on those run fakes like that. And you definitely don't want to see a guy getting trucked. But going back and just looking at it purely from a stat standpoint, I think maybe he deserves a second look because, again, being the second leading tackler, maybe he came through more often than I thought he did maybe late in the game. So that's something I'll be looking at when I do take a second look at this as we get ready to kind of dive into this game more in our newsletter on Monday. Another one that I think is a loser for this one was the second team offensive line, particularly in the center, the middle group of the offensive line on that second unit. They didn't look great. They didn't give Aidan the time, to really make some throws. And obviously, we'll get to Aidan in a sec. Don't worry. I know that's going to be a hot button topic moving forward for a lot of people. But I thought that they didn't do a great job in terms of picking up blitzes and keeping a clean pocket for him, especially when early on in the game when that second unit did get out there and started getting some burn. So wasn't too happy with the way that group showed. I think they're going to be watching the film and have a lot of things to be able to go back and correct. Now, look, we do have to talk about Aidan. Look, we have said multiple times that he's had a very good camp, and a lot of people are like, he sucks, like all this stuff. I think people need to chill out a little bit on that because, like I've said, and like many other media members have said, we've had this conversation many times. Like, we're a little baffled of what we've seen in the preseason games because he has looked really good in practice. Pete's even a little confused as well because he was talking about that interception that he threw tonight. And he said that's not a throw we've seen him make in practice. So it's a bit concerning to see him make that in the game. That was what Pete was talking about after the fact. And it is. Because if you think about it, like, this is a guy, I think if you go back to the preseason last year, maybe he presses a bit too much. He was in that battle with Gardner Minshew. And I personally thought that he earned the starting role by the time the preseason was done last year. I thought he should have been named the starter. But obviously, we all know what happened. Gardner Minshew goes and ends up being named the starter. And then the season goes and it turns into what it was. And then Aidan obviously ends up taking over. But the preseason outings have not been great for Aidan. He's got 3 interceptions this year. And obviously the stuff last year. I look at particular in the last preseason game of the year last year, I believe was here. He was actually having a really good game, and we're all saying, like, okay, he's going out there and he's taking that starting job, and then he goes and makes a pretty bad pass and gets picked off there, and then we're all sitting there wondering, like, what's going to happen? And then, like I said, that's when Gardner ended up taking over and becoming the starter there for them. I think we're seeing a bit of that here this time around, which is weird, though, because he has no reason to be pressing. Because, like, let's be honest, Cam Miller is a 6th-round pick, is very much a developmental prospect. He doesn't have any reason to be pressing. Like, we all came into this thinking and like, look, he's pretty much locked in as the number 2 quarterback. And I really don't think that's going to change. I think he's going to be the number 2 quarterback pretty much no matter what happens over the next probably 2 weeks here, especially in the last preseason game, which I know some people aren't going to like to hear that, but that's just my informed take off of what I've seen and having talked to the coaching staff and the players and all that stuff and what I've seen at practice as well, because he looks very comfortable in practice. In the game, it just has not translated to that. I don't know why that is. Pete Carroll doesn't know why that is. Again, maybe he's just pressing a little bit, trying to do a little too much, but very clearly not making the greatest decisions in the world. And that is something that's concerning for a third-year quarterback. But that's not a guy that should be pressing or should be worrying about, am I going to lose this job or anything? Because, again, Cam is a developmental project. Now, to Cam, we have to talk about this because he comes out of this looking like a winner. Aside from that last drive, the last drive was bad, obviously. So you got to knock him a bit on that. Takes the 2 sacks and, then throws that interception, which leads to them losing the game. But on the drive when he let him down into the red zone, looked real comfortable. Like, look, this guy has played a ton of football, passed for nearly 10,000 yards, had I think 81 passing touchdowns, and only threw, if I remember right, 19 interceptions. That is, sorry, I think he only threw 19 interceptions when he was in college. So like, has very clearly made good decisions throughout his career. And I know that was the FCS level and all that stuff, but North Dakota State is a solid squad, and obviously they're playing at a higher level than many of the teams that they do face. But really impressed with what I saw out of Cam on that drive where he let him down to the red zone, was making a lot of plays, was moving around too. He's an athletic guy. I think some of us maybe forget that. Maybe it's just me, but he's moving around. He's reading things really well. Looks just real comfortable. He said multiple times that he is a rhythm type passer. So when he gets into that rhythm, he can really start kind of feeling it. But like, we saw one time, I believe it was on a post or maybe an over route, strings it between two linebackers, just looked real comfortable there. There was another one where they got him on the move and he throws it down the left side there, so have been really impressed with what Cam has shown. And I'm sure the staff, when they go back and watch the film, is going to think the same thing, because this is a guy that the more and more work he's gotten, the more and more comfortable he's looked. So, again, been really impressed with Cam and what I've seen with him thus far, the more that the weeks have gone on. And I've said it multiple times on the podcast, he's good for just a flat-out dime like every other day at practice or every couple of days at practice. And like I said, though, too, Aidan has been playing so well at practice. So, like, it is just a bit confusing. And I know that's going to be a talking point for so many people going forward. People are going to be, clamoring for Cam to be the number 2 guy. And I think it's a crazy debate, to be completely honest, because why the heck are we talking about a backup quarterback August 16th at the end of the day? Because if all goes well, Geno will be your guy for the entire season. Now, if God forbid something were to happen to him, then that's when you have to sit there and wonder about that. And depending on how the next 2 weeks go, I wonder what their decision would be if it had to be like a long-term thing. That is something that would be an interesting discussion to have 2 weeks from now. But for now, I think Aidan is safe in the number 2 job. Cam has shown well. Keep in mind, he is also playing against a lot of guys that probably won't make it on rosters. And I know Aidan also is playing against some guys that won't be on NFL rosters either. And the simple fact is he's making plays he's making decisions that he shouldn't be making. And that is concerning, again, for a guy that's played as much football as he has, started as many games as he has in his 3rd year. Like, this is nothing new. The preseason should be easy for him, and it hasn't been. So, again, that is something I'm concerned about, like I said, but not like overly concerned, because he has looked good in practice. And again, if everything goes well, the Raiders won't have to see Aidan O'Connell out there on the field this year. So let Cam develop, and let's talk about next year, what he ends up really looking like if he continues along this track, down the preseason here. I think that's pretty much all I got, guys. Again, impressed with what I saw from this team. They took care of the biggest issues. Again, the tackling, the run defense, and the running offense, and the offensive line being able to open holes. So, liked what I saw out of that group. I thought Geno looked good, throwing the deep ball. They were just almost there on a couple of them. So, going to be more things to go back to for them to work on the timing of those things, of taking those deep shots. But I think if you're a Raiders fan, you walk away from this game being pretty happy about what you saw from the offense. And then again, the defense, it's that kind of coin flip where, hey, look, the defensive line going to be pretty good, and we're going to be able to rush the passer. The big question is are we going to be able to cover on the back end? And at the end of the day, especially in this league, the AFC, and in this division as a whole, and sorry, it's kind of loud down here as they're breaking things down, but in this division as a whole, you have to be able to rush. You have to be able to cover. We know that the Raiders defense is going to be able to rush. The big question going forward is going to be, will they be able to cover? And a big answer to that question eventually will be who ends up being the guys in coverage there. And those battles will develop and, come to fruition over the next 2 weeks here. So I'm excited to see who those guys end up being. And then we'll see what they do when the real live bullets start flying. But anyway, guys, the Raiders are off the next 2 days. So no more podcast for us, but we will have our next newsletter on Monday. Again, if you're not already subscribed to our newsletter, go to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com. You can subscribe to that for free. We get much of a deeper dive into today's game in particular. I'll be taking a second look at the film and diving deeper into some of the guys that impressed me, some of the guys that didn't, some of the things that concerned me, some of the things that I thought looked good. It always helps to get that second look at it. And so in that newsletter on Monday morning, you'll have more of my thoughts and a much deeper analysis on today's game and things you can kind of go moving forward with and what it means for the Raiders moving forward. So again, go to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com to subscribe to that. Those newsletters drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. It's good stuff. I have fun putting those things together. Also, wherever you guys are watching or listening to this podcast, please do make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and give us a 5-star review if you like what you heard. Tell me what you guys think about doing this at the stadium as well. Is the audio bad? This is a new mic I'm using here. Obviously, it's a little loud as there's a lot going on here, but I'm curious what you guys think about this, both visually and on the audio platforms as well. I want to know how this sounds, because if it's not great, we can reiterate this and make it even better for the next time, because this is how I want to do it. I'd love to be able to take this on the road, for week 1 in New England, to be able to do it out on the field and have this setup work. But I want to make sure it's dialed in and looks good, because you guys know how we do it here on the Silver and Black Sports Network. It needs to look good, so let me know what you guys thought of this one. I really appreciate you watching, and we will catch you next time.